Hello, this is your annual ESL Compliance Training, which will go over scaffolding, differentiation, teaching strategies, assessment, and legal issues regarding multilingual learners. Okay, first we want to talk about cultural competence. It's defined by the NEA as having an awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms of students and their families. It is very important that you learn about your EL students' cultures. What holidays do they celebrate? What values are important to them? Do not assume that they celebrate the same holidays, enjoy watching the same sporting events, or gather at a church each Sunday morning as you might. We all have ideas or biases that may have been placed there by our parents, or ones that we've developed over time, or ones developed due to our lack of understanding. The first step is recognizing and being aware of those ideas and biases. And we can all agree that certain people are treated differently based on their appearance. Some people will criticize a woman for wearing a hijab but don't think twice about a nun covering her head. This sort of awareness is called acknowledgement. Third, each of us has to commit to making every student feel like their way of life is perfectly fine and call out our adult peers who say or do anything other than make our students feel completely welcome. Lastly, go the extra mile and educate yourself on the cultural differences of students you have in your classroom. Learn about their religion, their foods, their holidays, and everything that makes them who they are. Don't assume because someone is born in the United States that they are English speaking. The U.S. has no official language. Also, don't make assumptions about newcomers and why they and their family have made the journey here. Don't assume you know what they have been through. Find out what you can about their backgrounds and their families. Student backgrounds of recently arrived English learners could include a difficult journey to the United States. They may have experienced or witnessed events that have traumatized them, and they should be treated with the same empathy, compassion, and dignity that any other human being deserves. This is so critical, these legal obligations. It is your responsibility as a general education teacher to make certain that all content is accessible to all students. Accessible is the key word here. If you do not, you run a risk of violating their civil rights. It does not matter what content area you teach, what grade level you teach, you must make your standards and curriculum accessible to all students. It must be comprehensible, and general education teachers are responsible for not only making the content accessible, but they're also responsible for making accommodations and modifications for any classwork, homework, tests, projects, etc. The ESL department works very hard to make sure that Obion County Schools is compliant, but it's your responsibility as a general education teacher to make your content accessible. Failing to do so violates the civil rights of your students. Okay, now we're going to talk about legal obligations. First, the 14th Amendment states that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. It's that section about due process of law that is so key to these court cases that I'm going to discuss. Title VI of the Civil Rights Law of 1964 protects people from discrimination based on race, color, or national origin and programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. Section 1703F of the Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 requires school districts and state educational agencies to take action to help English language learner students participate equally in educational programs. This includes overcoming language barriers that may prevent ELL students from participating. Okay. In the case of Lau versus Nichols, the Supreme Court unanimously decided that the lack of supplemental language instruction in public schools for students with limited English proficiency violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964. What this means for us is that public schools must take steps to ensure that English learners can fully understand what is being taught in the classroom. The decision affirmed that denying English learners a meaningful opportunity to participate in public schools is discriminatory. The ruling also stated that schools must adapt to the needs of their students rather than expecting students to adapt to the school program. Next, we have the case of Castaneda versus Picard. Castaneda versus Picard is significant for public school teachers because it established guidelines and requirements for schools to help students overcome language barriers. And the last, and certainly not the end of the court cases, but one of the more important ones is Plyer versus Doe. Plyer versus Doe found that it was unconstitutional to deny children living in the United States, whether legally or not, a free public elementary and secondary education. Now, I want to talk about the ESL background in the United States because many people believe that English learners in our public schools are a relatively new issue when it's really not. In the mid-17th century, 18 different languages were spoken here in the U.S., and that's in addition to the Native American languages that were already spoken before any outside settlers came to the United States. Today, estimates range between 350 to 430 languages spoken here in the United States. Bilingual education in the United States dates back to 1664, so it is definitely not a new thing. In the late 1780s, certain areas of the U.S. offered free public education for all. Thomas Jefferson himself was a huge proponent of free public education for all. He believed only educated citizens could make the American experience in self-government succeed. He proposed a system of broad, free public education that was radical in his day, but eventually did come to fruition, as we know. Compulsory attendance came into being in the late 19th century. And altogether, educators in the United States have been teaching English language learners for 360 years. We do have free public education through 12th grade in the United States because our leaders throughout the centuries realized, and still do, that our country requires an educated population to be productive and peaceful members of society and to participate in our democracy. Okay. At the end of last year, we completed our it's called a TELSA, the Tennessee English Learner LEA Self-Assessment. So for Obion County's Tennessee English Learner LEA Self-Assessment, one of our identified areas of need is that the LEA has not ensured that all teachers plan and deliver rigorous grade level content to the ESL students. So for the 2024-25 school year, we have committed to having school leadership conduct walkthroughs to gather and analyze data to support progress toward this goal. And we have been working on developing a rubric for leadership to use that aligns with the team observation guidance for teaching ELs. Leadership will compare data from this year to next year in order to demonstrate progress toward the goal of ensuring that all teachers plan and deliver rigorous grade level academic content. This will require training of administrators to evaluate effective strategies for teaching ELs. I'm going to continue on with these leadership goals for admin and coaches. And before I get started, I wanted to go through a few of the acronyms. One is ELD, that stands for English Language Development, and ELP, which stands for English Language Proficiency. Administrators should be familiar with both sheltered instruction and content-based instruction, either of which your teachers are probably using in their classroom with ELs. Admin should also be familiar with the curriculum our system uses and be able to offer suggestions for teachers for methods of formative assessment to gauge student progress in making content comprehensible. Further leadership goals for admin and coaches is to have them allow teachers time to collaborate with one another and discuss EL students that they have in common. One teacher may have found a method for teaching a particular student that is effective, and it's just really helpful for faculty to share ideas and work together to help our students succeed. Admin should provide useful PD opportunities to help teachers make content comprehensible for all students. Further goals that we have set as an LEA include teaching academic standards, scaffolding, and effective strategies to engage your students and to improve your expertise for serving English learners. All educational personnel, including grade level teachers, parapros that work with English learners, school administrators, counselors, and support personnel are included in this training. Okay, we're going to discuss classroom climate. If you have never heard of Stephen Krashen, he is one of the foremost experts on English language development. He is a professor emeritus at USC, and his effective filter theory has been informing teachers on how to best set up an environment for English learners that is conducive to learning. His theory explains the connection between emotions and language acquisition. If a student's affective filter is high, their anxiety is going to keep them from learning. However, if it's low, students will be safe and confident to be active participants in your classroom. To keep that filter low, please try to put yourself in the student's position and be compassionate. Think about how you could be helped. Do your best to keep EL stress and anxiety levels low by being kind, compassionate, and empathetic. Keep a calm, even tone and speak slowly. Work with the ESL department to develop a plan for helping your ELs who seem to be suffering from a high affective filter. So we're going to discuss ELA scaffolds now. Explicit teaching of academic vocabulary is critical to really any content area, not just ELA. We know that it's one of the highest predictors of whether or not students are going to master your content. So it's important for students to be able to practice all 4 domains of language daily. And those 4 domains include listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Tap into your students' background knowledge of a topic to determine if you need to build it up before diving headfirst into a lesson. And use the student's home language and background to your benefit. Okay, for math scaffolds, the most important thing is to keep the content concrete and use visuals and realia. Realia are objects or materials from everyday life that students have seen before, are familiar with, and they're used as teaching aids. They could even be actual pictures that you've cut out of a magazine of like perhaps an orange. Not a drawing of an orange, but an actual orange. It would be better if you could bring the actual orange into the classroom. To delineate steps in solving a problem, use different colors to make each step stand out. You could use a particular color for each operation, such as red for subtraction and green for addition. Multimedia is a form of communication that uses a combination of different content forms such as writing, audio, images, animations, or video that can help strengthen comprehension. The table on this slide is a suggestion for teaching social studies vocabulary. And social studies vocabulary uses very different meanings for common English words. So this table is made for students to organize the vocabulary into its common meanings and its meaning in social studies. And you'll see the first vocabulary word in the table is party. And the meaning in everyday life of a party is a social gathering. But the meaning in social studies is a group of persons with common political interests. There's also example sentences for the students to read in context down at the bottom that go along with the table. Now, a good extension activity for this would be to have the students create sentences using the context area definition to demonstrate their understanding of the vocabulary to the teacher. And I would actually take this vocabulary further and provide students with visuals of each of the vocabulary words, especially if there are historical paintings that accurately depict the definitions. Some more scaffolding suggestions to help the ESL students in your class include giving them a copy of the notes with the key vocabulary words left blank while all the other students write all of the notes. They can better keep up with your lecture or whatever it is that you're teaching, and they can put keywords and phrases through a pencil. And there is research to prove that putting something through a pencil does help commit it to memory. Provide examples to students of how to begin a sentence. You can give them word banks to use on their homework and on tests. You can get copies of a book that you're using in class in their native language, if it's available. Use visual stimuli to clarify the meaning of words and phrases. And again, just using different colored ink or highlighting to delineate steps or to emphasize important information is something that's really important. Just keep in mind not to expect English learners to be able to do the same work as English-only students. Modify the length of the assignment. Really think about the main topics you would like students to master from a task and leave out all the extras. Okay, so we're going to talk about some activities that you can include in your lesson plan. It's always best practice to front load vocabulary. That means that you are teaching the vocabulary at the first of your lesson, at the beginning of your lesson, before you even get into it. And we know that an understanding of vocabulary is one of the best predictors of whether or not a student will succeed in learning your content. So, with keeping that in mind, we want to keep it simple. About 5 words is enough, give or take 2, depending on the child's age. Choose the most important vocabulary for comprehension of your content, and then build a mini lesson around those chosen words. Cognates are words that are similar or the same in 2 languages. Cross-check your vocabulary with the student's native language to determine if there are any cognates you can share with students. This is a really great practice because it benefits students to understand the etymology and morphology of the words, because they can take that knowledge and apply it again when they come upon other new vocabulary that may use the same root word. This is true for all students, so it's going to benefit everyone. Another practice you can use is to enhance a student's background knowledge. If you were going to read a text that took place during the Dust Bowl or the Great Depression, you would first teach students about what life was like during those times for those people before you began reading the text. Another strategy is to teach a mini lesson on how to use context. to find the meaning of unknown words or unknown phrases before reading anything you know may have wording that could be problematic for students. Stop regularly during the reading to determine their understanding and to clarify meaning of words and phrases, and to also ask text-dependent questions. We're going to talk about for some strategies for engaging your students in the lesson. I want to first begin by suggesting that you talk to your students. See what you can find out about them. See if they have siblings, see if they have pets, and be genuinely interested in their lives and the things that they like, whether it be music or sports or any other area of interest. Make certain your students understand and appreciate human diversity and that a feeling of belonging is provided for each and every one of your students. Okay, some of you are very aware of and have of some of these engagement strategies, and some I have already mentioned. What we want to do is reduce the frustration level of these students, because this leads to students who are going to be more independent and motivated, and they're just going to overall feel competent on what they can do in your classroom. Sentence starters or sentence frames can help them focus on the content rather than focusing on the task of creating a sentence. There are hundreds, possibly thousands, of graphic organizers you can use in your classroom. You can search online for something that fits your needs or create something that is new using document formatting software. An additional scaffold would be to have the graphic organizer partially filled in for your English learners, especially newer arrivals. Visual aids are very important, incredibly important. You probably already have posters, anchor charts, or bulletin boards in your classroom that you refer your students to. Seeing and hearing simultaneously can aid students in making new connections. Picture dictionaries aren't just for little ones, they're also content area picture dictionaries for middle, high, and adult students to use. The average teacher pauses for less than 1 second to call on a student after asking a question. It is hard to wait 5 seconds. It seems like an eternity, and it is especially so for students who know the answer immediately and have trouble waiting. And this is a good time for those students to hone their inhibitory control skills. But try it. Call on the student, ask the question, and count to 5 in your head while waiting for a response. ESL students need that additional wait time so that they can have time to process what you have said, do some possible code switching, and then produce language to give you an answer. Still talking about engagement strategies, I want to talk about TPTs, which stands for Total Participation Strategies, and it's exactly what you think it is. Participation of everybody in the room, which I know is sometimes very, very difficult. But if you think about the traditional question and answer sessions of teaching, when you call on only a few students, how much evidence of student learning are you able to gather from the whole class? What about the rest of the students whose hands don't even go up? So you want to find ways for the entire class to respond, and this can provide you with a lot of information about who in your classroom is mastering your content. Here are some examples of TPTs so you can get total participation from your students. Most of you are familiar with Think, Pair, Share. If you're not, the way it works is that the teacher poses a question, the students think to themselves, then they get paired with another student or a group of students, and then they share or discuss what they thought about. So they think to themselves, then they're paired with a student or a group, and then they share their response. And teachers can expand the share into a whole class discussion after the students have shared with their pair or their group. Think, Pair, Share allows ESL students time to think, and it also gives them that opportunity to practice speaking, listening, and writing if you so choose to, because they can also write down their response. Another fun one is quick draws. And quick draws are fun for any grade level. And you can use this strategy to have students demonstrate their understanding of a single vocabulary term or concept by quickly drawing their interpretation of that concept or vocabulary word. Okay, some more holdups. And holdups are exactly what you think they are. Students hold something up all at once to show their understanding. Some teachers use whiteboards or these whiteboard paddles, multiple choice note cards, popsicle sticks, true false cards, yes no signs. Um, I used to use an app called Plickers that I would highly recommend. When you get the app, you enter your class into it and it creates a QR code that's unique to each student, and you print them out. And the students can rotate their square card to A, B, C, or D and hold it up. And with your device, you can scan the QR codes of the entire class in just a few seconds. And Plickers will give you instant feedback on each student so you know who is understanding the content. Now, since all students have laptops, game-based learning platforms are great for total participation. Some of the more popular ones are Kahoot, Quiziz, Blooket, Quizlet, and Gimkit. I've used Blooket and Quizlet myself, and I can attest to their effectiveness at total participation. And I have seen other teachers use Kahoot and Quiziz, and both were effective at getting all of the students to participate. Um, Other teaching aids that you can use in your classroom would be to check the ancillary materials that come with the textbooks that you use. Many of those resources are accessed online now, so you may not have paper resources to use. The new McGraw-Hill math curriculum provides many resources for English learners. Now, there's more for the younger grades than there are for middle and high school, but they are there. If you don't know how to access these materials, get with the other math teachers in your building or contact the instructional coach for math. Now, for the remainder of the 2024-25 school year, all students have access to Learning Ally when they log into Clever. And Learning Ally provides audiobooks for students to listen to, text being read at a comprehensible pace. And Learning Ally also has many titles that you may already be using in your class in Spanish for them to listen and read along with. So, take advantage of these two things that you may have to use. Okay, we're going to continue talking about engagement. Now, most students love to use technology and will gladly join in any opportunity to use it. It provides a low-risk situation for students who are scared and shy and may need more time to show you what they know and show you what they can do. They can use the internet to access content in their native language to supplement what they're learning in your class. YouTube has a lot of videos of topics in other languages, which is especially helpful. Personally, I have witnessed students using videos in Spanish to help them understand the allegory of the cave by Plato, events of the American Revolution, how to balance an equation in both algebra and chemistry, and to understand the electromagnetic spectrum. What you can do is you take the topic that you're teaching, type it into Google Translate and find out what the translation of it is, and then copy that translation into the YouTube search bar, and it will bring up videos of that topic in the language that you need them in. All of the teachers at Ridgemont or most of us anyway, I think, we have Google Translate on our phones, and it's got a speaking feature to it. So the students who are really young and can't type in something for us can speak, and it will translate what they're saying for us. So that's another tool that you could use that would be very helpful. Okay, let's talk about what effective teaching is with English learners. So, for example, if a teacher decides to read To Kill a Mockingbird with her class, she would first give students background on life in the United States during the Great Depression, in addition to race relations in the South during that time period, because both of these topics are going to be important to understanding what happens in that text. Now, a teacher introducing inertia probably shouldn't use an example of a roller coaster because that's going to exclude any student that has never had that experience. It might be better to use the experience of somebody turning sharply left or right in a car because everybody has ridden in a car or on the school bus. It's important for all the students that we make a concerted effort to pronounce words clearly and use correct conventions of English. Give students the chance to speak within a small group and to write what they can. That means that if you've got everybody else in the class writing a 3-paragraph or a 5 or 6-paragraph response, maybe you're having them just write 1 paragraph or a few sentences because that's all they can do with it. You need to meet them where they're at and modify that assignment for them. Modalities. When I talk about modalities, they can include anything that taps into the student's senses: visual, auditory, tactile, and so on. Assist them in making connections between what they are learning to real life experiences and knowledge by asking them leading questions. Sometimes they'll get there on their own, and sometimes they need you to lead them there. Okay, I've said this before and I'll say it again. No teacher has the time, or the energy for that matter, to teach every single standard to mastery. And for that reason, educators need to take a look at their standards and see what the main areas of focus should be. Stick to the big ideas that are actually going to make a difference. Focus on language acquisition. When you're differentiating for language learners, do not forget to use pictures, models, diagrams, other visuals that are going to prompt students to discuss the content. And it is really important to have students use 21st century skills such as invention, critical thinking, collaboration with other students, have good information literacy, and be self-directed. So here are some reminders and some changes for the school year 24-25. After 10 years, Tennessee is no longer a WIDA state. WIDA is a consortium of member states directed by operations at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Tennessee is now an ELPA 21 state, which is a part of CREST, and that is the National Center for Evaluation Standards and Student Testing at UCLA. ELPA 21 stands for English Language Proficiency Assessment for the 21st Century. Before I get into the very simple standards we will now have, I want to remind you all of the 4 domains of language: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. 2 of these domains, listening and reading, require students to process language. So they receive comprehensible input through listening and reading and make sense of what the brain has taken in. The other 2 domains, speaking and writing, require students to produce language. Speaking and writing are much more difficult tasks because students must produce the comprehensible input for others to receive. Okay, these are the 10 ELP standards that ELPA 21 has, and we really like them. They're simple. They're easy for anybody to add to their lesson. They're organized according to how language skills relate to content area standards across 6 grade bands. And those 6 grade bands are kindergarten, first, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. Standards 1 through 7 focus first on processing language from your content so they can progress to producing language. And then standards 8 through 10 are about sharpening the finer points of language features to improve their mastery of the first 7 standards. So I'm going to give you the abbreviated version of the standards that are in front of you. Number 1, construct meaning from listening and reading. 2, participate in speaking and writing. So with number 1, if we're constructing meaning from listening and reading, we're processing language. So number 1 is just processing language. Number 2 is to participate in speaking and writing, which is producing language. So number 1 is processing language. Number 2 is producing language. Number 3, speak and write about text and topics, producing. Construct oral and written claims and support them with evidence. That's production or producing. Number 5, it's got two topics in it. The first one is to conduct research, and then with that research, evaluate and communicate your findings. Number 6, analyze and critique others' arguments through speaking and writing. And number 7, adapt language choices with purposes, task, and audience when speaking and writing. Okay, now for 8 through 10. 8 says to determine the meaning of words and phrases when listening and reading. 9, create clear and coherent speech and text. And 10, make accurate use of standard English in speech and writing. It is so easy to add these to your lesson plan. And it doesn't matter if you are teaching first grade science or you're teaching driver's education. It's easy enough to find tasks on here find standards on here that match the tasks that you're having the students do during a lesson. I know I just showed them on the last slide, but they're really easy to find with a simple web search using a web browser. You just search for ELPA 21 standards and they're going to come up automatically. If you are required to turn in a lesson plan to an administrator for an observation and you have English learners in your classroom, you must include a standard or standards that align with the objective of your lesson from the ELPA 21 standards. Okay, I'm going to talk about coding students because you may see this in Synergy, you may not, I'm not sure. But for the new teachers, you really do need to understand these different codes. So after a student has been screened by the ESL department, or it's a student that was screened with using ELP testing in the spring, students get coded in Synergy. If a student qualifies for ESL services, they are coded as an L, and we will often refer to them as Ls. They stay in L until their ELP scores qualify them for exit. We don't know what the new exit scores are going to be for this year. The state has not established that criteria for us yet. When they do qualify for exit, they are going to be mainstreamed completely into the general education classroom. During the first 2 years following exit from ESL, the ESL staff has to monitor their progress. And these students are referred to as T1s and T2s, which stands for Transitional Year 1 and Transitional Year 2. If you have a T1 or T2 student in your classes, you will be expected to fill out a monitoring form for each grading period and provide the ESL department with information about the student's academic or behavioral progress and also their attendance. Okay, ILPs are individual learning plans, and all students coded as Ls will be given a comprehensive individual learning plan. The ESL teachers write them just like special education teachers write IEPs. The ILP includes all of their demographic information, their ELP test scores, their goals, suggested modifications, testing accommodations that they get, and other relevant information. T1s and T2s also have an LP, but it is not as involved as one for an L. It is mostly used for monitoring their progress being mainstreamed into the regular classroom full time without support. T1s and T2s are eligible to receive some of the same accommodations that Ls receive, and those include extended time, rest breaks, and a bilingual word-to-word dictionary. Now, we can include these accommodations in their ILP if you think the student would benefit from them on the end of the year testing. However, they must they must get that accommodation and use it throughout the year to be able to have it at the end of the year. Okay, now you may have students who are special ed and ESL. These students are served through special education and ESL. If you notice a student who you think might qualify for special education, whether you think there's a cognitive problem or you even think the child is gifted, do not hesitate to go talk to the special education teacher and tell them about your concerns and what you've observed. And now, if you do have a student that fits into both of these categories, you're going to have to look at their IEP and their ILP and modify work for them according to those plans. Don't expect them to do the same task as the other students. Students who are identified for both ESL services and special education intervention will have both an ILP and an IEP. Okay, ESL staff may push into your classroom, and that's typically going to be for the students who are at an intermediate or higher level and they're getting close to exiting. When we come into your classroom, we are not there to critique your teaching. We're there to support your instruction and support the English learners in your classroom. If you do not have a designated table in your room for small groups, please see the appropriate staff at your school and about having a dedicated table where students can work with ESL staff without having to be pulled out of the classroom. We want to work with everyone that's involved in the teaching of English learners to ensure their success in the classroom. And we also want to be there for you to provide any guidance you may need in the decision-making process of anything related to English learners. And know that we are here to help you and support you. Kimberly Jackson is now the Title III Director for Obion County Schools. Danny Potts is the ESL teacher at Central. There are 4 ESL teachers at Ridgemont: Kim Jones, Amy Burcham, Stacy Halford, and me, Rachel Whites. We have a bilingual staff at both Central and Ridgemont. At Central is the wonderful, wonderful Dariana Martinez. And at Ridgemont, our bilingual staff consists of the amazing Jessica Jimenez, Cecilia Mandujano, and Orphalinda Aspel. If you have any further questions about anything I've presented here, just email me or any of the ESL teachers and we'll respond as soon as possible. Please contact any of us if you need guidance or assistance, and we will do what we can to help you. I hope everybody has a great year. Thanks for listening. Okay, ESL staff may push into your classroom, and that's typically going to be for the students who are at an intermediate or higher level and they're getting close to exiting. When we come into your classroom, we are not there to critique your teaching. We're there to support your instruction and support the English learners in your classroom. If you do not have a designated table in your room for small groups, please see the appropriate staff at your school and about having a dedicated table where students can work with ESL staff without having to be pulled out of the classroom. We want to work with everyone that's involved in the teaching of English learners to ensure their success in the classroom. And we also want to be there for you to provide any guidance you may need in the decision-making process of anything related to English learners.